These are some of the most shocking, rare pictures from the Wild West you wouldn't believe are real. Mass grave for the dead Lakota following the Wounded Knee Massacre, 1890. The Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890 was the slaughter of about 300 Lakota men, women, and children by the United States Army troops. The Native American tribes had a religious belief that the ghost dance ritual would make them bulletproof and give them the power to regain their land from the white settlers. The U.S. Army responded out of fear that the rituals would incite violence against them. As a result, they annihilated hundreds of ghost dancers, which included men, women, and children of the Native Americans. This is an actual photo showing the mass grave dug for the hundreds of dead Lakota slaughtered in the Wounded Knee Massacre, as they couldn't dig a grave for each body. A photo of the last reunion of the survivors of the Battle of Little Bighorn, 1948. The Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand, was a significant engagement between the combined forces of the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes, and the 7th Cavalry Regiment of the United States Army. The battle took place on June 25 to 26, 1876, near the Little Bighorn River in the eastern Montana Territory. The battle was a decisive victory for the Native American forces, but it had significant consequences. The U.S. government responded with increased military force, and within a year, most of the Native American tribes involved in the battle were forced onto reservations. The Battle of Little Bighorn became a symbol of Native American resistance and a notable event in American history. The Lakota called the Battle of the Greasy Grass due to the bloody aftermath. This picture, taken in 1948, is of the last reunion of the survivors of that war. Orville-Jackson Eagle Drugstore, 1922. Orville-Jackson's Eagle Drugstore is a historical landmark in Eagle, Idaho, with a rich history that dates back to the early 20th century. Initially, the Eagle Drugstore was opened by L.B. Harris in 1906. It became a vital part of the community, expanding in 1916 to include a soda fountain, which made it a popular spot for locals and trolley passengers. In 1922, Orville-Jackson, an Idaho native, purchased the store and transformed it into a general store of regional fame. Under Jackson's ownership, the store became known not just for its pharmaceutical services, but for its wide variety of goods, embodying the slogan, "If I don't have it, you don't need it." This is a picture of the store in the 1900s. Surprisingly, the building that once housed Orville-Jackson's Eagle Drugstore still stands and has been repurposed to continue serving the community. The outlaw John Shaw removed from his coffin, 1905. This troubling picture is of the outlaw John Shaw, removed from his coffin and propped up against a picket fence for one last drink of whiskey. John Shaw and his friend Bill Smith robbed the Wigwam Saloon in Winslow, Arizona, and made away with about $300 in silver coins. They fled towards Canyon Diablo, where they were confronted by a sheriff's posse. In the ensuing shootout, Shaw was killed and Smith was captured. Shaw's body was quickly buried in a makeshift grave near where he fell. However, the story didn't end there. When word of Shaw's death and the shootout reached a group of cowboys from the Hash Knife Cattle outfit, they were particularly troubled by the fact that Shaw had died without finishing his drink. So the cowboys traveled to Canyon Diablo, dug up Shaw's body, and propped it up against a fence. Then they poured whiskey into his mouth. Bison Skulls, 1892. This photograph of the mountain of bison skulls taken in 1892 is a stark and haunting symbol of the near extinction of the American bison in the late 19th century. This iconic image was captured outside the Michigan Carbon Works in Rougeville, Michigan. During the 19th century, the American bison population was decimated by commercial hunting and U.S. government policies aimed at subjugating Native American tribes by destroying their primary food source. By the time this picture was taken, the bison population had plummeted from millions to just a few hundred individuals, primarily confined to Yellowstone National Park. Today, conservation efforts have helped to restore bison populations, though they remain a fraction of their former numbers. Sitting Bull Bounty, 1890. This picture shows the bounty placed on the Lakota Sioux leader Sitting Bull. In today's currency, after adjusting for inflation, his bounty would be almost $150,000. Sitting Bull is best known for his role in the Great Sioux War of 1876 to 77, particularly the Battle of Little Bighorn. He led a coalition of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors to a significant victory against the 7th Cavalry Regiment, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. After the defeat of Native American forces in the subsequent years, Sitting Bull and his followers fled to Canada, but eventually returned to the United States. In 1890, he was killed during a confrontation with Indian police at the Standing Rock Reservation. Sitting Bull remains a symbol of Native American resistance and a celebrated figure for his unwavering dedication to his people's rights and way of life. King of Outlaws, Rube Burrow, 1890. This is the picture of a man known as the King of Outlaws, Rube Burrow, after he was shot dead for trying to escape prison. Just like Sitting Bull, he was killed in 1890 and had a bounty of $7,000 on his head. Today, that would be about $200,000. Rube Burrow was a notorious American outlaw active in the late 19th century. He became infamous for his train robberies and was one of the most wanted men in the United States during his criminal career. After several years of evading law enforcement, Rube Burrow was finally captured on October 9, 1890, near Linden, Alabama. He was betrayed by a fellow outlaw who tipped off the authorities. He was shot and killed by his captors when he tried to escape custody. His death marked the end of one of the most infamous train robbing careers in American history. Bronco Bill and Family, 1887. This is the actual photograph taken in 1887 of a notorious outlaw, William Bronco Bill Walters, and his family. He was known for his involvement in bank and train robberies and for his ability to elude law enforcement. This photograph is significant because it portrays Bronco Bill, not just as an outlaw, but as a husband and father. It also reveals the dark side of the Wild West, as you can see that the little boy in the picture already had a gun. This photograph of his wife and son provides a poignant reminder that even the most notorious figures have personal lives and stories that extend beyond their public personas. Memento Mori of the Dalton Gang, 1892. Memento Mori literally means remember, you must die, and this picture shows the deaths of 4 members of the notorious Dalton Gang. The gang was headed by 4 brothers known as the Dalton Brothers: Bob, Bill, Grattan, and Emmett. They were known for their bold train and bank robberies, and their criminal exploits have become legendary in Western folklore. The gang is most famous for their attempt to rob 2 banks simultaneously in Coffeyville, Kansas, on October 5, 1892. They fought against an entire town in their last raid, and about 4 members of the group died, including 2 of the brothers. Emmett Dalton, the youngest brother, was the only one to survive, and he wrote a book about their lives after being released from prison. The Dakota War of 1862. This is a picture of the displaced Lakota after the Dakota War of 1862. The Dakota War of 1862, also known as the Sioux Uprising, the Dakota Uprising, or the U.S. Dakota War, was a significant conflict between the United States and several bands of the Eastern Dakota, Sioux, that took place in Minnesota. The war was driven by years of tension and injustice faced by the Dakota people, culminating in a violent uprising. In the aftermath, many Dakota were captured and subjected to military trials. These trials were swift and often lacked proper legal procedures. Many Dakota who surrendered were interned and later forcibly relocated to reservations in South Dakota and Nebraska. This relocation led to further suffering and loss of life. The certified photographs of Billy the Kid. Despite being one of the most notorious outlaws and gunfighters of the American Old West, Billy the Kid has only 2 certified photographs. Billy's criminal career began with petty thefts, but it quickly escalated. By the age of 21, he'd reportedly killed 21 men, though the actual number is likely lower. Billy was captured and escaped multiple times, becoming a folk hero in the process. His daring escapes and ability to evade capture added to his legend. This solo picture of him and this other one, where he was playing a game with other outlaws, are the only 2 accepted photographs confirmed to be Billy the Kid. Some other people have tried to claim being Billy the Kid, and while some might share a certain resemblance, they are simply rumors. Outlaw Tom Blackjack Ketchum, 1901. This is a horrifying picture of the face of outlaw Tom Ketchum, also known as Blackjack, when he was being hanged in Clayton, New Mexico in 1901. Tom Ketchum was a notorious outlaw in the American Old West, known for his involvement in train robberies and other criminal activities. His criminal career began with cattle rustling and small-time thefts in Texas and New Mexico. He quickly escalated to more serious crimes, joining or forming various outlaw gangs. He was captured in 1899 when he tried to rob a train single-handedly at Folsom, New Mexico. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death by hanging. The execution was poorly handled, resulting in a gruesome decapitation when the noose was improperly set. The Hatfield Family, 1888. This is a picture of the members of the infamous Hatfield family in 1888. They were involved in one of the most famous family feuds in American history. The feud involved 2 rural families living along the Tug Fork of the Big Sandy River, which separates West Virginia and Kentucky. During the Civil War, the Hatfields and McCoys found themselves on opposing sides, which sowed the seeds of animosity. The Hatfields were Confederate supporters, while the McCoys were Unionists. The feud between these 2 families was so bloody that the government had to intervene. In 2003, descendants of the Hatfield and McCoy families signed a symbolic truce, formally ending the feud and promoting peace and cooperation between the families. Today, the feud is remembered through historical markers, museums, and annual events in the region. The last picture of Buffalo Bill Cody, 1917. This is the last picture taken of Buffalo Bill Cody in January 1917, about 5 or 6 days before his death on January 10, 1917. William Frederick Cody, popularly known as Buffalo Bill Cody, was an iconic figure of the American Old West. He gained fame as a soldier, bison hunter, and showman, and he played a significant role in shaping the popular image of the Wild West. Cody claimed to have killed over 4,000 buffalo in an 18-month period. This, combined with his scouting and military exploits, helped solidify his reputation as a frontiersman and earned him his famous moniker. In his later years, Cody became an advocate for conservation, particularly for the buffalo, which he'd once hunted extensively. The Horrible Story of Olive Ann Oatman, 1856. This is a picture of Olive Ann Oatman, an American woman who became famous for her experiences as a captive of Native Americans. She received the distinctive blue tattoo on her face during her captivity. Her story shows some of the darkest sides of humanity, especially in the Wild West. Her family was attacked by a group of Yavapai Native Americans. Olive, her sister Mary Ann, and her brother Lorenzo were the only survivors. Lorenzo was left for dead but managed to survive and was later rescued. Olive and Mary Ann were taken captive by the Yavapai and held for about a year. The sisters were then traded to the Mojave people, who treated them better than the Yavapai. Olive survived and lived with the Mojave for about 5 years before she was rescued in 1856. The Scary Eskimo Medicine Man. This is a picture of an Eskimo medicine man performing a ritual to exorcise evil spirits from a sick boy. The medicine man is wearing elaborate ceremonial garb, which likely includes animal fur, feathers, and a mask. These items are significant in shamanic traditions, as they're believed to help the shaman communicate with the spirit world. Eskimo medicine men, also known as shamans, played a crucial role in the spiritual and physical well-being of their communities. These individuals held deep knowledge of traditional healing practices, spiritual rituals, and the natural environment. While this photograph may seem scary at first, you can rest assured that it was before a healing ritual to help the boy, not kill him. Apache Spirit Dancers. The same applies to these scary-looking people. They're called Apache Spirit Dancers, also known as Ga'an dancers or crown dancers. They play a vital role in the spiritual and cultural traditions of the Apache people. These dancers are central figures in various ceremonies, including healing rituals and rites of passage, such as the coming-of-age ceremonies for young girls. Their performances are imbued with deep spiritual significance and are intended to connect the community with the spiritual world. Laura Bullion, 1901. This is the picture of the woman often referred to as the Rose of the Wild Bunch. Her name is Laura Bullion. She was associated with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid's Wild Bunch gang in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Laura was involved in several of the gang's train robberies. Beyond participating in robberies, she was involved in the more logistical aspects of the gang's operations, such as forging signatures on stolen banknotes and fencing stolen goods. Laura Bullion was arrested in 1901, convicted of robbery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. After her release, Laura Bullion largely disappeared from the public eye. She moved to Memphis, where she lived a quiet life under the alias Frida Lincoln. Table Bluff Hotel and Saloon, 1889. This is a picture of the interior of a bar at the Table Bluff Hotel and Saloon. It was built by a man named Van German in 1852. The hotel was located in Table Bluff and served as a stopping point for travelers, offering lodging, meals, and other amenities. While the inside of this bar looks quite horrid, the place is a social center where locals and travelers could gather to host events, meetings, and social gatherings, contributing to the social fabric of the region. This is a picture of the people of Table Bluff taken in 1912. Although this looks ominous at first glance, this is actually a barn dance, not a ritual. The hotel is believed to have closed in the early 20th century as the region developed and modernized. Santiago Jimmy McKinn, 1885. This is a picture of the 12-year-old Jimmy McKinn who'd been abducted by a group of Apaches and their leader Geronimo in 1885. Jimmy, who was 11 at the time, and his 17-year-old brother Martin were attacked while herding cattle near their ranch in Mimbres Valley of New Mexico. Unfortunately, Martin was killed during the raid, while Jimmy was taken captive. During his stay with his captors, he was given the name Santiago. When Jimmy was found by the U.S. Army the following year, he refused to leave the Apache because he'd gotten so accustomed to their way of life. He was reported to have cried and thrown a fit like a wild animal, but eventually he was reunited with his parents once again. This picture was taken with the other Apache children in their camp before Santiago was sent back home. Death Valley Lost 49ers, 1849. This is a picture of the Death Valley, where a group of pioneers known as the Lost 49ers who set out from Salt Lake City met a hard fate. This happened in October 1849 during the California Gold Rush. They hoped to find a quicker route to the gold fields of California, but ended up taking a disastrous shortcut through what is now known as Death Valley. Death Valley was, and still is, a harsh desert environment. The group struggled with weakened oxen, lack of water, and extreme heat. They relied on a snowstorm for water and had to abandon their wagons, using the wood to cook their remaining oxen for food. Despite the severe hardships, only one member of the group perished within Death Valley. The ordeal gave the valley its ominous name. Upon leaving Death Valley, one of the pioneers reportedly turned and said, "Goodbye, Death Valley," cementing the name in history. The Long Walk of the Navajos, 1868. This picture depicts the suffering of the few survivors of the Long Walk of the Navajos. The Long Walk of the Navajos, also known as the Long Walk to Bosque Redondo, was a tragic and pivotal event in the history of the Navajo people. It was a period when the U.S. government forcibly relocated the Navajo, Diné, from their homelands in present-day Arizona and New Mexico to a reservation at Bosque Redondo in eastern New Mexico. The journey was brutal. Many Navajo were already weakened by the Scorched Earth campaign, and they faced starvation, exposure, and harsh treatment from soldiers. An estimated 200 to 500 Navajo died during the march due to these conditions. Upon arrival, the Navajo found that the Bosque Redondo reservation was ill-suited for their needs. The reservation became known as a virtual prison camp due to its dire conditions. Big Nose Kate. This is a picture of the infamous Big Nose Kate. She's best known for her association with the legendary gunslinger Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday is one of the most famous figures of the American Old West, known for his role as a gunslinger, gambler, and close associate of Wyatt Earp. Kate was known for her fierce loyalty to Holliday. She famously helped him escape from custody in Fort Griffin, Texas, by setting fire to a shed, creating a diversion that allowed Holliday to flee. The couple parted ways years later due to Holliday's worsening tuberculosis and heavy drinking. Kate spent her later years working various jobs, including as a housekeeper and boarding house manager.